Pastor Nate.
The month of April, and I know we still have 3 weeks left, I want to turn our attention towards this strange focus that we're going to start on in Mark, because we've just kind of had that mountaintop experience, and we've all had that with Easter, and then I'm sure you felt that way if you saw the eclipse. There's certainly a twinkling of the eye and heart, if you will. Those kind of feelings do not pass easily, and so as you're coming down the mountain, you might be asking yourself, how do I respond to the resurrection of Christ? And we're going to see that specifically with the disciples today, that they do not respond in the best way. They actually respond with 3 arguments. They have arguments with religious leaders, they have arguments with themselves, and they have arguments with people who are doing what Jesus wants them to do. And so as we're about to look at Mark chapter 9, if you want to join me there in Mark chapter 9, I want us to focus on this phrase, follow Jesus. You'll see that this is a repeated phrase that Jesus commands people as they come to believe in him or see what the wonder that he is. He will say, come and follow me, right? And so as you're following Jesus, what I want to say and what we'll see over the next 3 weeks here is that when you follow Jesus, you are doing so in a sense for a rewards program. A rewards program. And what I'm getting at here is maybe you can think about a rewards program that you're a part of right now, whether we're talking about frequent flyer miles for my people who love the airplane trips or people who love frequent coffees in hand. And so you said, yeah, I'll download the Starbucks app and collect these stars. It's kind of ingenious. I'll give it to these capitalistic people who say, yeah, we're going to give you a little bit of dopamine because you came to our restaurant again. Yeah, you still think Taco Bell is okay for your body. Good job. Here's a reward and a free taco. You get more tacos because you came to Taco Bell, right? Every single company, store, thing, they are trying to get you to do more of what they have to offer because you came to their store. So come back more. Yeah, you get a free preview. These things are on sale to you, not to other people. Now they even have it on Disney Plus where you say, I want to watch a cartoon show for my kid. And they say, look, you have exclusive merchandise you can buy about this show that your kid's obsessed with. Wow. And so I want to take this idea that we kind of already have well in hand, well on our phones, and that are constantly in our face. Join our rewards program. You'll get more. And try and apply this to what it means to follow Jesus. Because when you follow Jesus, what you're doing is saying, I'm trusting with all of my life Jesus to give me more life. And so as you grow in that trust of Jesus, as you follow him, you're going to receive, as we're going to see today, but also you receive more life. And so next week we'll talk about what that life is that we receive from Jesus. And then probably counterintuitively, we'll see that following Jesus leads to a rewards program, you could say, by serving. So, like I said, the rewards program, it's kind of obvious, right? I want more free coffee because of how much coffee I buy, right? It does not always make sense when you're following Jesus. Yes, you came to him for life. You came to him for eternal life. But there are rewards right now that we should be pursuing, that we're meant to live right now. If Christianity was all about waiting for God to beam us up one day, take me now, Lord, right? Christianity would be a very unimportant part of society. Following Jesus would be a very small matter. But he challenges us, he grants to us a reward for following him today. So what does that look like? That's what we're getting into. But if you would, go ahead and join me in Mark chapter 9, and we're going to start in verse 14. So keep in mind those 3 arguments that kind of shape this here as the disciples have come down the mountain. Verse 14, Mark chapter 9. When they came to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the scribes disputing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were amazed and ran to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing with them about?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they couldn't." He replied to them, "You unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him to me." So they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, it immediately threw the boy into convulsions. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. "How long has this been happening to him?" Jesus asked his father. "From childhood," he answered, "and many times it has thrown him into fire or water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the boy cried out, "I do believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was quickly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Then it came out, shrieking and throwing him into terrible convulsions. The boy became like a corpse, so that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus, taking him by the hand, raised him, and he stood up. After he had gone into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And he told them, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer." Verse 30. Then they left that place and made their way through Galilee, but he did not want anyone to know it. For he was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after he's killed, he will rise 3 days later." But they did not understand this statement, and they were afraid to ask him. Verse 33. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, because on the way they had been arguing with one another about who was the greatest. Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be last and servant of all." He took a child, had him stand among them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one child such as this in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but him who sent me." John said to him, "Teacher, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he wasn't following us." "Don't stop him," said Jesus, "because there is no one who will perform a miracle in my name who can soon afterward speak evil of me. For whoever is not against us is for us, and whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name because you belong to Christ, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward." Verse 42. "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to fall away, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. And if your hand causes you to fall away, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life maimed than to have 2 hands and go to hell, the unquenchable fire. And if your foot causes you to fall away, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life lame than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to fall away, gouge it out. It's better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if the salt should lose its flavor, how can you season it?" And then please pay attention to this last verse. "Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with one another." All right. Once again, we're doing this where we're climbing through a whole chapter, and that seems like a lot. That was a lot to read. I'm a little out of breath, but you know why that is. But I want to break this down into 3 parts here. Once again, we're saying this is a rewards program of following Jesus. But the first part of this is to receive from Jesus. And maybe this is surprising how I'm phrasing this, but we follow Jesus to receive help, Jesus, and one another. Help, we receive Jesus, and we receive one another. First off is help here. I said the story is kind of structured around these 3 arguments. Once again, I asked how you respond to Easter, that mountaintop experience. Well, they saw a sneak peek preview of Jesus, what he's going to be like in heaven on the Mount of Transfiguration. All right, he was transformed before their eyes, transfigured even, to say, here's what his heavenly body will be like. They got to see that. And what's their first thing they do? They pick fights with the religious leaders of the day. But the person that Jesus is helping out here in verses 14 to 29, we're told that he is the leader of the synagogue. So it's very interesting that the disciples, as they're having a fight, they're fighting with who? Other religious leaders like the synagogue leader. The people who would be most concerned about helping out the religious leader who has a possessed son. They say, yep, that's the people that we're going to pick a fight with. Also, could the disciples cast out the demon from the boy? So just imagine what kind of argument that is. No, we have the one true and living way, and also we're just as incapable as you. Right? What that argument would have been like, it's laughable. It is. It's ridiculous for them to be so caught up in themselves. We have the true and living way. Yes, you have Jesus, but you don't have the power of Jesus. You just know his name. You've just been following him around like a sick puppy. Like this is not what it means to follow Jesus. The synagogue leader, this person who's just meeting Jesus, who understands his deepest need, can look at Jesus and understands what it means to receive from Jesus. I want us to see here what he's going through. So if you have a child, this is just heart-wrenching to imagine what this would be like. But in verse 17, he says, teacher. So that's how he views Jesus at this point. He understands the Old Testament and can explain it well. He's a teacher. I brought my son to you. He has a spirit, an evil spirit, right? A demonic force that makes him mute, unable to speak. So the son can't talk. As a father of a child who does not talk, who is almost 4 years old, it's a very heart-wrenching thing for me personally. But I want to say that this is not a matter of health, that this is clearly, if you ever ask these questions, why are there so many demons at work in Jesus' day? Just imagine God himself takes on the weakness of human form. I think his arch nemesis, if you want to get into superhero terms, would start invading like crazy, saying, now's our chance to get him. So if you don't see much in the way of demonic forces working in the world today or possessions, that's okay, right? It's okay. It probably happened to Jesus a lot more than it's going to happen to you. That's a good thing, right? Okay. Just want to address that while we're in it. But to say that this is not a health matter, this is a spiritual matter. There's a spiritual evil force that is causing this son to not speak. And we understand that this is at least probably a preteen or something along those lines, because we're also told that he has been going through this since childhood, if you want to see that in verse 21. How long has it been happening to him from childhood? And we're also told what else has been going on. Verse 22, this demon could even cause, if it wasn't for this very caring father, we could say that this demon would have led to the boy's death. Many times it has thrown him into fire or tried to drown him in water is kind of the implication there, throwing him in these situations where the boy could have easily died. But the father, once again, being there, kind of saving his life. This is clearly a good father. This is not a consequence. This is not a punishment. This is an evil spiritual force entering into a good father, a loving father, a compassionate father who's asking the Son of God, Jesus, to have compassion on them. So let's get to it at the end of verse 22. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. All right. Jesus' response here might seem a little bit harsh, but it's getting to the matter of faith. This seems to be a difficult thing for the people of God to understand all the way back in Leviticus and Exodus. Like these priestly things that you're trusting in, these sacrifices that you're making, these very religiously ordered matters are so heightened, but they're not powerful in themselves. What makes them powerful is that you trust God that they work. Just to put it very simply, that you trust God that these sacrifices get the job done, solve your deepest need. That's why they work. And there's many times we could address that in the Bible, but I want to stick to the words of Jesus here. Pardon me. And so as Jesus continues here, he stops and kind of repeats his own words to him in verse 23. Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible for the one who believes." This kind of faith, I want to say it is strikingly different than believing in oneself. Because, and maybe you're thinking about somebody who says the phrase to you, self-manifest, or I can make it happen on my own will, or maybe you're listening to popular music artists who are a little off their rocker but used to claim Jesus as their Savior. I'm not going to name names here, but recently one of these former Christians who has now said words against God, who's a major music star and all in his own right, he said that I went through something very, very difficult in my life. And I prayed. I asked God to deal with my problems, and he ignored me. And so you know what I said? I said, I'm the God of my life, and I'll do it. And that's why I'm successful today, is because I got over those things for myself. This is like within the last month that this interview has happened. Once again, with a very, very well-known pop star who claimed Jesus for a season, made a lot of money off of it, and now is not. But that's essentially the perspective, is that I have faith in myself. God's not going to do it for me. And what we could say about that is that what this kind of attitude towards prayer is, because I'm sure a synagogue leader, like, this is not just a compassionate father, this is a man of faith. He's known to be somebody who points people back to God again and again. Why can't the synagogue leader, right? Why can't he get his own son straightened out? Shouldn't he have the spiritual prowess to figure this? Come on, cast out the demon. You're the big teacher. You're the one organizing all this to happen. You might even see the synagogue leader here as like a trustee in the church, to say he's the one who organizes the teacher. He says who can speak and when. If there's something broken in it, he's the one that makes sure the right people fix it. How has this problem not been solved before? It's an attitude towards prayer that treats God like a genie, or like I heard recently, a friend of mine from Evansville said that this is treating Jesus like Santa Claus, right? If you're good, he'll give you a good present, right? He'll give you something good, but you got to behave. You got to behave. He sees you when you're sleeping. This is not the God that we serve. We do serve this God of compassion. And I want to get to that because here is the attitude that we should have in prayer. And it's, once again, the synagogue leader who has this for us. Verse 24, immediately the father of the boy cried out, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." It's like, I've seen you work here, God. I knew that was you who got me through that moment. I saw that over there. Oh, man, I can't believe I went through that in my marriage, and you helped me. You are the one who preserved us. Oh, I can't believe the things that you've done. But this, I don't believe in. I think that's really what it is that I don't think you can do it. My religious leaders, your spiritual followers, the disciples, they couldn't do anything. Well, I believe in God. I don't know about you, though. It's a hard question. It really is. But what I want to get us to see here is how Jesus addresses the unbelief. This is a great thing that we need to have. So we receive Jesus, yes. We receive his help by asking, please help my unbelief. Well, here's what Jesus does. In verse 25, Jesus saw that a crowd was quickly gathering. And you might be saying, oh, Jesus is trying to kind of up his ante a little bit, trying to get a crowd here who spread the story. No. Because we're told in this exact same passage, Jesus does not want people to know where he is. What Jesus wants people to know is that this boy had a demon and no longer does. This town would have seen the synagogue leader every single week and known that's one of our spiritual leaders. We respect him so much. And he has this thing that he struggles to believe God about. And so Jesus waits until a crowd gathers who would have known the Father to say, if you ever have doubts again about your son, if you ever have doubts again about what God is doing, we were there when the demon was cast out. We were there when Jesus did that for you. And one little theme that we're going to see running through this whole passage here is how God is providing others who witness the things that God does for you to keep you on the path, to keep you going, to keep you trusting, to keep you as a person who believes even when you can't believe. Help my unbelief. I believe over here. I believe that like nobody's business. Yeah, God created the world. God sustains the world right now. Great. What in the world is going on in the Middle East, God? What are you doing over there? Right? Or, God, what are you doing right now? I'm trying to have a relationship with my spouse in the right way. I'm trying to have this relationship with my kids. I'm doing all the right things, and nothing seems to be working out. What is going on? Well, I might ask the question, who do you have that you can trust and who you know is trusting God along with you to help you in these things, to remind you? But it starts with this, by asking. But let's go ahead and we'll move on here. And maybe just a side note to make sure we don't miss it. As the disciples question their inability, their explanation Jesus gives in verse 29, he told them, you guys can't do this because this kind can come out by nothing but, say it with me now, prayer. Prayer. Okay. Next thing here, I want to talk about receiving Jesus because this is what I'd love to be as a church. As a church, when it comes to the description of this neighborhood, as they pass this church, I want them to say, and I think you would too, that's the church where Jesus is at. You know Jesus is present with those people. I may not agree with everything they say the Bible teaches, or I may not agree with this worldview or that political blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that. Do they know that we have Jesus here at this church? The Jesus that the Bible presents as clearly as we can say it. Is that how they view us? I think you would agree that we want to be a church that receives Jesus. So how do we do it? How do we get to be one of those people? I love this passage so much because it comes right on the heels of that argument, who is the greatest? And instead of directly addressing that, he instead brings up a child in verse 37 here. Whoever welcomes one little child such as this in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not just welcome me, but him who sent me. So church, if you want to be a church who is known to be welcoming Jesus, this is how you do it. You welcome kids. You welcome kids. But Jesus takes us a little bit further. We have a little bit of a side here, and I'm going to circle back around to it. But I want to continue this thought for just a second. Because it's not just about welcoming kids, making kids feel like they belong. It's also helping those kids to believe. So jump down with me, if you would, to verse 42, and we'll circle back here in just a second. So by helping kids believe, because in verse 42, he comes back to these little ones, this kid that's in front of him, and in front of the 12 as well. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to fall away, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. All right, that's not a heavy necklace. That's a 500-pound stone. Jesus is talking about you're going to die. You should die in a very painful and tragic way because of what the atrocity that you've just done. By leading a child who already believes in Jesus because mom said so, right? Because dad said so. I believe in Jesus. The Bible's true because, yeah, that's everyone, all my closest friends, they say so. That's called the church, right? That's called the family. That's called welcoming Jesus in our midst, that we've all said this together. But if you lead one of these kids to fall away, or I'm trying to remember the different translations here because they're all sticking with this phrase, to stumble, I think is the NIV, and the King James, if you can help me out here, is offend. I want to say, is that right? Someone give me a nod? Great. Offend, if you offend one of these kids, right, hurt their feelings so bad because of what the church did to them, I think that word offend is maybe a little bit deeper than just hurt feelings. It is about unbelieving, coming to this point where I did believe and now I don't. Have you met somebody who, as a child, was in church and now today they want nothing to do with the church? They want nothing to do with Christians, in fact. They might get offended by the fact if you tell them you're a Christian. It's like, oh, I grew up with that. I know you're kind, right? And they almost talk to you like an animal for a second. It's a terrible, tragic thing that Jesus is wanting to make sure that we take seriously And so when kids are in the room, we talk a little differently. We stand a little straighter, I hope. We're trying to think about what that example is. I do mean kids here. We're talking about a very small child, someone and how they're influenced. My wife and I have worked with children for the greater part of that we've been together. Even when we were dating, we got to hang out with my in-laws at a downtown area. And Bob, if you get to know him, you can ask him stories about that after-school special. A lot of fun there, to say the least. But we know how kids overhear every conversation. And so an adult walks in the room and they want to talk to another adult. They talk to them like, yeah, this is how adults talk. Kids get used to it. Adults are talking. Rather than think, the kid's going to overhear me. They're hearing the attitude that I have. They're hearing the condescending way I talk about work or another employee, another person made in the image of God. And they pick up on it, right? Oh, my mom and dad said that Jesus wants us to love everyone, but I guess adults don't do that. This is the soft heart that a child has. We're going to talk about it next week a little bit more. But it's so helpful to understand how these little hearts can be led astray, can be led to stumble, as the NIV puts it, by just us not caring about our words, our attitude, our approach to them, our value of them. When I was a kids pastor or a family pastor and kids came in and they were new, I never learned the parents' names. I had the kids' names first. I was like, yeah, you're Johnny's dad, right? Like, I don't need to know your name. You're Johnny's dad. And the parents wanted that. They wanted me to know that, yeah, Johnny's favorite pet is a turtle that he has named Oliver. Yeah, and his favorite movie right now are all the Marvel movies. You talk with Spider-Man with him? Great. That's what we need to know, is that Johnny is cared for. I'm Johnny's dad. That's all I need to know. And that's the kind of attitude, the way that we approach kids and care for kids that takes Jesus' words seriously. Because there's something that'll happen if we don't. And I think it's why Jesus does take this severity that he has and ups it up a little more. So go ahead and join me, if you would, in the next verse. So he continues the language, whatever translation you have, stumble, fall away, offend. It carries it on again and now makes it personal. And it's about sin. Verse 43, and if your hand causes you to fall away, cut it off. And it goes through a few different other examples, doesn't it? These kind of striking things here are about extreme measures to avoid sin. Understanding yourself, understanding the things that you are tempted to that lead you away from God. It's impossible to say how many different things you have in your life that are pulling you towards sin, but you know the ways and the steps that you've taken to make sure that you don't sin. Like this little thing right here, like the most powerful little supercomputer in the world, is a world of danger. Do you know that you can put locks on it? It doesn't mean that you don't know the combination, but if you can just give yourself a large obstacle, even the smallest way to say, I'm not going to have access to the internet. Do I know the password? Yeah, I can change it. Do I have an account on that site that leads to dangerous things? Maybe I do, but I don't have the app downloaded anymore. I'm not touching that to even get rid of my old account, right? These are the extreme measures that I hope that you're thinking about when it comes to sin. I don't go near that person because they always lead me to gossip. Right? That person at work, they're going to get me chatterboxing again. I'm not talking to them. They're no longer my friend. Is that unloving? Maybe, but I'm going to be unloving towards God if I don't. That's what we need to take on from these extreme passages, because they're severe, they're harsh, they're painful. But this is the severity that Jesus is calling us to, because if we don't care enough about sin to cut it out of our lives, to take the extreme measures, then what Jesus says is very clear. We'll go to hell. There's unquenchable fire there. And anytime you see these ideas that are clearly symbolic, because this discussion is in all kinds of media right now about whether hell is real because Jesus uses symbolism. The symbols are because the description of what hell is really like is too tough for words. It's too hard for us to swallow. And so Jesus is using fire that doesn't stop. Unquenchable fire. Worms aren't dying there. It's worse than that, right? That's what we need to understand by this kind of symbolic and imagery that's being used here. And last part of this, though, circles back to what this whole chapter has been about, and we'll conclude. Because if you're going to receive one another, you need to be somebody who stays salty, So I know we kind of read through the verse, put ourselves last, put others first. But all of this whole fighting with sin, all of these different obstacles that you're creating, these extreme measures that you're going to root out sin in your life, has to do with receiving one another. So how do you receive one another? You stay salty. Verse 49. For everyone, hey, what does everyone mean? Everyone. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if the salt should lose its flavor, how can you season it? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with one another. All right, maybe salty is a word that we need to reclaim as Christians here. It's universally understood in the times of the Bible up until Jesus' day and all the way back into the book of Leviticus, or you can go to Numbers 18 if you want to, or 2 Chronicles 5. Salt is about preservation. It is about keeping things good. Anybody ever had salt-cured pork before? Like you're thinking about it right now. I know you are. It is about maintaining something, preserving its health. So how does Jesus intend for us who are tempted to the point where I feel like I got to cut off my own hand if I'm going to be able to stay without sin, if I'm going to fight out sin, how does he actually intend for you to fight sin? How does he actually intend for us to be a church that welcomes and receives Jesus because we love children and we want to keep them safe by any and all means necessary? Yes, I'll fill out that background check right now. I'll do it, right? Whatever the cost is, I'll pay it out of my own pocket. Like, how are we supposed to do that? By living with one another, being at peace with one another. This is the kind of preservation that we need to have. The only way that any of this works is if we are pursuing peace. And this whole idea that everyone will be salted is talking about how your life is a sacrifice. You are constantly giving things up, cutting things off out of your life because you know they're not good for you. Maybe I shouldn't go to the rewards program of Taco Bell as much as I have, right? Just apply that to any other part of your life you know is causing you to sin. You keep tossing these things into the fire of your own choosing because you're trying to follow Jesus, because you want to receive him. You want to receive his help. And you want to receive one another. The only way that you will fight off sin, the only way that you will follow Jesus is if you are tightly bound with one another, with others who are trying to follow Jesus too. It's too extreme. It's too painful to keep giving things up and not have someone come alongside you and remind you, I see you have a moment right now of unbelief. You know, we can ask Jesus for help right now together. I'm praying for you when I'm not with you, but we're going to pray right now for it. In just a moment, we're going to take the Lord's Supper, and this is one of the ways that the church reminds each other that Jesus has finished the job. He's paid for all of our sins in full. It's worth cutting it off and cutting it out of our lives by whatever means necessary so that we can follow him, so we can have more of him. And so I want to leave us with 3 questions. I'm going to do this for the next 3 weeks. If you want to keep a little journal, I might encourage you to just think about these questions for yourself this month. It's going to be 3 questions, and every single week it's going to be about others. Because that's what this whole thing is being about. It's like we could be the disciples who come down and see Jesus transfigured, what he's like in heaven right now, and have little arguments about ourselves of how we're better than other people, how that church down the road doesn't have the real Jesus, but they're passing out cups of water in Jesus' name. What I want us to do is to consider why we need each other. So some things for yourself. Are you receiving from Jesus in your following? Are you asking for help from others and your doubts? the things that you're questioning God about maybe, the circumstances in the world, in your faith. Are you helping to grow others? Yeah, children is a great place to start. Your own kin, that's the reason why we saying God give us Christian homes. You should be concerned about your kiddos, your grandkids, absolutely. But is there someone else that you're helping to grow right now? Can you name it? Or can you just name the person? How are you helping them to grow? There's a way you're doing it. There is. But it'll work far better, and you'll be more intentional about it if you know what it is. And then lastly, are you protecting peace with others? I just put a giant 10-page document, front and back, so 20 pages-ish, about us being together, us being a united church, us looking towards things like Vacation Bible School, which we haven't done in a few years, us looking towards the future in ways that might be different than the past. Is that scary in some ways? Maybe. But as we do so, whatever God brings about, are we protecting peace with others, and how are we going about it? Who is somebody today that you need to make sure that there's peace between you? I saw it just this past week. Politics got brought up, and someone immediately said, "This is not the thing to divide us. Let's get over this." And I've got nothing against you. And they said to the other person, "I got nothing against you." And it was restored right then and there, and I got to see it happen with my own eyes. I was like, that's beautiful. That is the good news of Jesus working. Because as we're about to take the Lord's Supper, here's how it works. Jesus himself, the God-man, he was at perfect peace with God for all eternity past. And when he came to earth, he continued that perfect relationship, saying, here's what it's like. And then he went and allowed himself to be captured, tortured, and taken up to a cross, in probably the most excruciating way someone could die. And so if you would take the cup, I want you to consider this, because his body was broken so that you could receive this peace with God. That's what allows this peace with one another, is that we have complete and total reconciliation, a restored, perfect relationship with God. But it's because Jesus had his body broken for you. Would you take the bread? And that same night, as he instituted this thing for us to do, he said, as often as you do this, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Because you'll remember that his blood was spilled out for you. And to do this as often as you can, remember what I've done for you, to make you completely and totally right. Would you take the cup? And at that night, as Jesus instituted this brand new way of remembering the covenant, of keeping the covenant, they went out and sang a song, and that is how we're going to dismiss today.